So the nomenclature of knowledge, I'm just going to do an intro. Nomenclature of knowledge is really the machine language to effectively store and retrieve massive amounts of data instantaneously for decisive decision making. Organizational diagnostics and logistics, basically how are organizations organized so that when you go into an organization, you know exactly where you are and how to navigate the organization through collective knowledge and language to be able to allow for mobility, either horizontally or vertically within the organization or to other organizations for upward mobility. Professional and academic strategic planning. This is a 20, 30-year plan that basically lays out what you need to be doing and thinking about over the next 20 to 30 years in your career. And again, it's going to go very quickly. The social learning model and hybrid personality model, that was based on Bandura's work from Stanford University. I'll go through the process of self-efficacy, modeling, self-confidence, and leadership attributes. This one over here, time management for highly effective individuals. If you're going to be going on in your career or in your academia, you better have very efficient time management and logistics, because you're not going to be able to get around and get to things effectively. And when you're managing as many things as I manage, you want to know exactly what you're going to be doing every single day, every minute of the day, and then allocating your time. If you do all of these things successfully, you're going to have a finance problem. You're going to be making a lot of money, you're going to be accumulating assets. The question is, where do you put the money from an investment management standpoint, and then how do you hedge it using risk management tools and strategies to protect your investments. And lastly is asset protection and wealth management, because by the time you're 50 to 70 years old, you have probably accumulated millions of dollars of assets, and somebody's going to steal your shit. Either it's going to be the government, or some unscrupulous individual or partner, or one of your family members is going to steal your wealth. So the question is, do you have the legal structures in place to not only protect it, but also to transfer it to the people you want to transfer in a highly tax efficient and effective way? Okay, so let's start with the nomenclature of knowledge. Okay, the nomenclature of knowledge is basically an inter-institutional analytical model. It basically frames how to approach problems within the social science realm. You are in the social sciences. You are in finance and marketing. Business is in social sciences, along with psychology and anthropology, politics, international relations, public administrations. We are not in humanities. We are not in sciences. We are in social sciences. And the social sciences require a different modeling or a different analytical approach. We're dealing with problems that are highly complex. There's many, many variables. A lot of the variables are hard to identify. A lot of the variables are non-stationary and highly volatile. We're talking about a lot of variables, so we're talking about massive amounts of data points, lots of modeling, and it's very hard to model and quantify. But you can model it and you can quantify it. When I developed this model, and I'll get into it in a minute, in 1996, this had been attempted in the econometric field and in other fields, but had not been perfected because we did not have the data processing and the data storage and advanced data analytics and statistical techniques that were developed back then. We have advanced statistical applications now. We have massive storage ability. We have instantaneous data processing capabilities. So we can now solve this equation today, but we couldn't do it in 1996, and we sure in the hell couldn't do it in 1956. So this is a multi-institutional model. There's different institutions, there's different schools of thought, there's different equations. You can also look at them as equations. And the equations or schools of thought, when you're building the model, has 50 variables in them. So for each of the institutional analyses or each of the schools of thought, if you're trying to predict, and what we try to predict is the value of equity, the value of the stock equity, value of the real estate equity, value of the human equity within yourself and or your family. So the dependent variable is the value of equity. Then you use the individual schools of thought, the individual institutional frames, the individual equations to be able to solve the dependent variable. The first model or first frame of analysis that you use is accounting. Accounting is the basis of everything, from a cost accounting or managerial accounting standpoint to a financial accounting standpoint. Cost accounting, you need to understand what the cost is. You need to be able to figure out break even. You got to figure out IRR from an internal basis. On the financial side, we need to be capturing financial data so that we can go through the accounting cycle to produce the balance sheet and the income statements under GAAP accounting on a consistent basis, to be able to report to the bank, to report to the bondholders, report to the shareholders, and to be able to access capital in the capital markets at the lowest possible cost. So accounting is the first frame and the first equation. And again, remember there's 50 variables within that equation. The next is the finance model. Now, the finance model builds on the accounting model, particularly from the cost accounting and the financial accounting and the statements. Once you get the financial statements in place and you can communicate the demand for your product, the ability of your firm and your finance and your profitability, you can then access bank financing, seed financing, round A financing. You can access the bond market, you can access the stock market, and you can raise capital from those different sources at a cost significantly less than the return on your assets. So the finance layer is extremely important too. Accounting finance is also in the economic models. If you want to operate here in the United States or go international, you got to understand monetary policy, and I think that the Chinese situation and its impact on global stock markets, the Greece situation and its impact on global bond markets are two very good examples of economic variables at the macro level and for both monetary policy and fiscal policy that will have a direct or indirect impact on your business and the value of your stocks and bonds and the value of your human equity. So you have to understand the economics, not only the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, but what are the political, economic, institutional environments in which your business operates in if you're going to be going overseas. You better have a clear view of that because there's lots of risks. The economy in the finance and accounting is affected by the bureaucracy in the public administrative apparatus because it is the politics, the political science realm, the political realm, lower house of Congress, the Senate, as the policies move through the policy formation process, are reconciled between the parties that represent different interests. When those policies are enacted and become law and are administered through the public administrative process, they will have direct and indirect and intended and unintended consequences on you personally and your business. So the question then becomes, do you even follow politics? Do you follow the policy formation process? Do you follow the reconciliation of those policies? Do you calculate the probability of those policies being enacted? And then did you do the economic analysis to figure out if you personally or your business was going to be directly or indirectly impacted by those policy outcomes administered by the bureaucracy? Senior level managers and boards of directors think at this level. They think about policy, they try to influence policy, they conduct the analysis, and they're constantly asking the question, if this policy is enacted, were the intended and unintended outcomes, and am I going to benefit or am I going to get hurt from those policy outcomes? The law, basically our political economic system, is dictated by philosophy. Our philosophy is not a Middle Eastern Sharia philosophy or theocracy. It is not an Asian theocracy of Confucianism or Taoism or Taoism. It is a Western civilized philosophy based on the rule of law that was determined and was formulated by Western philosophers out of Europe, mainly Immanuel Kant, Rousseau, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mills, were basically the founding philosophers that basically have dictated our political economy and our political philosophy and how it actually functions here in the United States and in the Western world. Theology. If you go back and you look at our system of governance, right now it looks very similar to theocratic systems and Catholic systems and Islamic systems that date back 7,000 years. The bureaucratic process, the policy process, the impacts of those policies on citizenry and business are basically the same. So what you see around you in the way corporations and governments and nonprofits function, their structure has been around for 5,000, 7,000 years. And it was modeled off of theology. And again, if you decide to go to other parts of the world, religion and theocratic institutions have a larger impact on society culturally, socially, and economically. And you have to understand that. The last two systems are the understanding of social and individual psychologies, and we'll get into that as we move through, and the sociological process. The way that I look at this is each one of these institutions of knowledge, each one of these schools of thought are basically multiple regression equations. Because I'm trying to run a regression so that I can put in the independent variables to forecast the impact on the value of equity. As I build these models for each one of these institutions, there's at least 50 variables in each equation. There's variables in one equation that are also in the other equation. So if there's any movement of any variables in any equation, it's going to have an impact on the outcome or the dependent variable of the other equations. So the question for you, which I believe, is do you understand this system? Do you understand that it is a multiple regression equation with 50 variables, and that the only way that you can solve it is simultaneously? It's a simultaneous equation. It's a simultaneous regression solution. How do you, as an individual, process 11 equations with 50 variables in it? So it's 11x 50 factorial. So we're talking about thousands of combinations. The reality is we can model this in a computer, but the human brain is the most powerful computer ever devised. It's a biological system. Every single day, your brain transacts 1 trillion biological transactions. Your ability to restore and retrieve data is infinite. Your ability to process this information is infinite. So not only do you have unlimited processing capabilities and storage capabilities, but you can store the data and the information, if you store it correctly, to be able to retrieve that information and that data for decisive decision making. And really what this model does is to help set up an infrastructure or machine language for you to be able to store that data and store that information within the individual buckets, to then be able to retrieve that data and that information when you are posed with that business question that needs to be resolved in a very short period of time. And know that you're making the right decision that's going to either protect or increase the value of your equity over time. So the thing that keeps this all together and allows the simultaneous equation to actually work, particularly here in the United States, and I would say other places in the world that are peaceful, is we have a unified linguistics or a unified standardized language, which makes it very easy to communicate amongst people and share knowledge very rapidly. You have a unified culture. You do not have very disparate cultures. Yes, there are economic, social stratification that's going on currently, but we're all pretty much homogeneous in our culture, in our communications. We all utilize technologies now with handhelds and cell phones and high-speed computers. We are now enabled with high-powered technology to allow us to be able to solve a lot of this a lot quicker than ever before. And then we have the architecture. If you look around you, the physical plant of this building, the physical plant of universities, of government buildings, corporations, office buildings, industrial, retail, is all architecturally functional. It works, it's highly productive, it produces services, and it enhances and allows for accumulation of capital very efficiently and that return on capital. So the takeaways here are, this is a machine language that you need to imprint in your brain. This is basically how the world works from a social science standpoint. You can plug in the physical sciences and the arts, if you want to, into this model. It's a complex system of institutions and equations. Variables in one equation are also in the other. It's a multi-institutional solution. You need to solve the solution simultaneously. It's basically a multiple regression equation that needs to be solved simultaneously in a big data cloud environment if you ever want to model it. And then it is we also have a biological process, and that biology allows us to be able to internalize these models and this for, again, massive storage, processing, and retrieval for effective decision making.